The first sound was not the roar of a bolter nor the hymn of a dying saint. It was breathing. Wet, shallow, and wrong. It came from the dark below Deck 17 where the lights had been dead for 3 cycles, and the scent of machine oil had turned sour. We thought it was just another malfunctioning servitor, some half-dead thing whispering to itself through ruptured Vox cables. We were wrong. What we found was not of the Imperium, nor of any archive the Mechanicus had ever catalogued. It moved like a shadow and cut like hunger itself. Even the orcs screamed before it tore them apart. I remember the first time I saw its shape beneath the lumen glare, black as void steel, its flesh glistening like oiled chitin. It did not kill for sport or faith or glory. It killed because that was all it was made to do. Before we go any further, I need to be honest with you. Sometimes I look into this endless void, and I see that 99% of you wander these stories but never swear your allegiance. If you stand with me among these tales of war, faith, and fire, then subscribe. It means more than you know. It helps these chronicles of the Imperium reach others who still remember what humanity once was. And tell me, from which world, hive, or system do you watch? I always read your messages. It reminds me that even across the stars, the spirit of mankind still listens. The first day we noticed the smell. Not the rot of dead flesh, and that at least is honest, but the kind of stench that crawls through steel that tastes metallic and sweet at the same time. The kind that coats the tongue and never leaves, no matter how much recaf you drown it in. We thought it was coolant leakage from the plasma drives. The engine seers prayed to the Omnissiah, ran their diagnostics, found nothing, yet the smell deepened. It felt alive. By the 3rd cycle, the ship's temperature began to drop. Condensation pooled across the ceilings, trickling down bulkheads like sweat. I remember wiping frost from my last rifle's charge pack, hearing it hiss as if the weapon itself was afraid. I was attached to the Gloria Victus, a supply frigate ferrying promethium drums and munitions to the Cadian remnant lines. We were 120 souls strong, a skeleton crew scraping rust from a vessel too old for the void. Our commander, Captain Vorn, believed discipline could substitute for faith. He was wrong. When the first body appeared, it wasn't even whole. Private Harn's torso was found near the hydroponics shaft, his lower half missing entirely. The medici said it looked like acid corrosion, but it wasn't corrosion. The edges of the wound were too clean, too deliberate. I saw the look in his eyes before they sealed the remains. He hadn't died fast. There were scratches on the walls near him, deep gouges as if something had dragged itself up the corridor on claws. The Mechanicus tech priests claimed it was the work of feral servitors. We wanted to believe them. Then came the noise. Not a sound you could locate, but a pressure that filled the lungs. It was like hearing the void breathe. One of the deckhands, a girl named Lisa, said it reminded her of a heartbeat, slow, patient, impossibly large. Every time it came, the lumen strips flickered. The machine spirits refused to obey. I caught the engine seer Magos whispering prayers to the Omnissiah beneath his breath, his mechadendrites twitching like a nervous animal. That was when I realized fear had entered the command hierarchy, silent and unseen. Captain Vorn ordered us to double the patrols. I led mine through the lower decks, the unlit corridors where coolant pipes met the cargo holds. My auspex flickered constantly, showing phantom heat signatures that vanished the moment we turned toward them. The air down there was thicker, humid. When I brushed the wall, my gloves came away slick with some resinous film I didn't recognize. It wasn't oil, and it wasn't organic. It shimmered faintly under the lumen torch, black like a mirror. We found an egg on the 4th cycle. That's what we called it, though none of us had seen anything like it before. It stood as high as my knee, its surface ridged like hardened leather. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, as though something within dreamed. The Magos ordered it sealed and shipped to the medbay for examination. I argued. Something in me recoiled from the thing instinctively, but my objections were noted and dismissed. Orders were orders. That night, half the ship's lights failed. I woke to the sound of screaming. Not the chaos of battle, but the sharp, choking kind that ends mid-breath. The Vox channels were filled with static and blood-curdled pleas. I ran barefoot to the medbay. The door was open. Inside, the walls were slick with something that steamed in the cold air. The egg had split open, its interior empty. The medic's mask lay on the floor beside him, his throat torn open. Above him, something moved across the ceiling. Fast, fluid, deliberate. I raised my las rifle, but by the time I fired, it was gone. The ceiling dripped where it had passed. We sealed the medbay, but it made no difference. The ship's corridors became a labyrinth of fear. Motion sensors failed, power flickered, and something kept venting atmosphere from sections we hadn't entered. Captain Vorn refused to retreat. He said the Emperor would not forgive cowardice. I wondered if the Emperor could even hear us out here, beyond the Astronomican's glow. Sometimes I thought I heard whispers through the Vox. Not human, not binary, breathing. The same wet sound from the first night. I began recording my reports by hand on a data slate, scratching words into its surface when the power failed. It gave me the illusion of control. But every time I passed the lower hatches, I felt watched. Once I saw Lisa standing motionless at the junction between decks, her eyes wide, face pale. When I called her, she didn't answer. Then she turned us and I saw the movement behind her. Black, smooth, bone-like. Her body convulsed as something lifted her from the floor. Her scream never finished. Only the dripping after. We sealed the lower decks after that. No one argued. The Magos wanted to purge the air with promethium, but the captain forbade it. Too valuable a resource, he said. I stared at the closed bulkhead for hours that night, listening to the faint echo of metal bending beneath weight. The sound wasn't mechanical, and it was rhythmic like the breath of something vast. I thought about the egg, the fluid, the missing men, and for the first time in my life I prayed. Not to the Emperor, but to the void itself, begging it to forget we ever existed. On the 10th cycle, the hull cameras caught movement outside the ship. Something crawling across the Gloria Victus's exterior plating. Not debris, not a servitor, something alive in the vacuum, gripping the steel with claws that left molten trails. The Mago stared at the footage in silence, his mechadendrites frozen mid-motion. No record, he whispered. No design. No designation. Then he purged the file from the archive. By the time I realized what that meant, it was already too late. The lights never came back on after that. We lived by the flicker of hand-held lumen sticks and the pale emergency glow that bled through cracks in the bulkheads like dying candlelight. The air tasted of rust and ozone, tinged with something organic that clung to the back of the throat. We stopped counting the days. The ship had become a labyrinth of wet corridors and humming steel, where the sound of dripping water could make a man draw his weapon. It wasn't fear anymore. It was reverence, the quiet understanding that something ancient had claimed the vessel and we were trespassers. Captain Vorn ordered a purge of the lower decks. We gathered what was left of the crew, 26 souls, gaunt, sleepless, hollow-eyed. The Magos brought incense burners and servitor-mounted flamers, mumbling litanies to the Omnissiah with every spark. As we descended, the walls changed. They weren't smooth anymore. Resin had grown over the steel like fungus, black and glossy, absorbing our light instead of reflecting it. Some of it pulsed faintly when touched, as if veins ran beneath its surface. The air thickened until even breathing felt like an intrusion. The first servitor froze mid-step, its limbs twitching. Then its Vox grill erupted into a burst of static that sounded like laughter. High, distorted, wrong. The Magos rushed to shut it down, but before he reached it, the servitor's torso burst open. Something small and glistening tore through its chest, vanishing into the shadows before we could react. We opened fire in every direction. Bolts of last light scorched the resin walls, but they didn't burn. The material just hissed and sealed again like living wax. We pressed on, though each step felt like walking into a throat. The corridors narrowed, the ceiling lowering until even the tallest among us had to stoop. We found cocooned shapes along the way. Crewmates sealed upright in the resin, eyes open but lifeless. One of them was Lisa. Her face was pale beneath a translucent film, her mouth slightly open as if still screaming. The Magos said to leave her. Contamination risk, he muttered. But I couldn't. I reached out to touch her cheek and her eyelids twitched. For a moment I saw movement beneath her chest, something pressing against her ribcage from the inside. I stumbled back. Vorn raised his flamer and burned her where she hung. The resin shrieked as it melted. I don't know if that sound came from her or from the walls. We reached cargo hold 17, or what remained of it. The space had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The crates were gone, replaced by a sprawling mass of resin towers and lattices stretching to the ceiling. And hanging from the center, suspended in strands of hardened secretion, was a shape like an altar. Upon it lay the bodies of the missing, Dozens of them, sealed in black, breathing faintly through half-formed membranes. The Magos whispered a prayer to the Omnissiah. The captain ordered the purge. We opened fire, but the moment the flames touched the nest, the whole structure came alive. The walls trembled, resin split open, and from the shadows emerged the first of them, tall, sleek, glistening black. Its movement was wrong, fluid and mechanical all at once. The light caught its surface for an instant, revealing an eyeless face that reflected our terror back at us. When it moved, it didn't run. It unfolded as though space itself bent to let it through. Private Kell fired first. His bolt struck true, but the creature didn't fall. It screamed, though not from its mouth. The sound came from everywhere, a metallic shriek that rattled the teeth. Then it was among us. Kell was the first to die, impaled through the chest, lifted into the air like a child's toy. His blood sprayed across the resin, which drank it greedily. The others broke formation. The Magos fell, his mechadendrites flailing as acid splattered his metal limbs, melting through in seconds. The smell was unbearable, not decay but burning purity. We ran. Emperor, forgive us, we ran. The flamers roared behind me, and for a moment the hold was a pyre. The resin walls blistered and screamed as the flames devoured them, yet the structure did not collapse. The creature moved through the fire unscathed, shadow and bone gliding in harmony. Captain Vorn was the last I saw, standing defiant, reciting the litany of hate, his bolt pistol barking until the slide locked empty. He didn't die with a scream, but with a whisper, "For Terra." Then the darkness took him. I don't remember escaping the lower decks. I just remember the silence afterward. The absence of noise so complete it felt like the void had swallowed the world. I found myself in the upper corridors, covered in soot, my weapon half melted. Only 3 of us made it back. We sealed the hatches, welded them shut, and overloaded the bulkhead circuits to collapse the passage. The explosions echoed like thunder through the ship's frame. For a moment we thought it was over. Then came the vibrations, faint at first like footsteps inside the walls. The metal groaned. We could hear them moving, not below anymore, but within the bulkheads, crawling through maintenance tunnels, vent shafts, power conduits. The ship had become their nest. The Magos had called it correct, though he'd never meant to. The Gloria Victis had become a living thing. We were trapped inside its body, the veins pulsing with resin, the air thick with spores. That night, while the others slept, I went to the observation deck. The stars outside were motionless, cold and distant. I thought of the Emperor, his light burning far away, the Astronomicon flickering through the warp. And I wondered if he could see this. If he could see us forgotten in the dark, our prayers were swallowed by something that did not belong to his order of creation. The ship creaked. Something pressed against the observation glass from the outside, leaving a handprint of acid and chitin. Then it was gone. Only the stars remained, and the slow, deliberate sound of breathing echoing from somewhere behind me. The Vox stopped working the next day. Not broken, dead. I remember sitting at the comms console, listening to the static fade into nothing, as though the void itself had decided to stop answering. Even the emergency channels fell silent, their auspex readings flat and motionless. We were cut off, and no link to command, no response from nearby patrols, no whisper from the Astronomicon. For the first time since I'd enlisted, I understood what isolation truly meant. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something that listened back. The corridors grew quieter too. The ship's reactor still hummed, but even that seemed muffled, as if the sound had to travel through layers of flesh instead of steel. Every movement echoed unnaturally long, and sometimes when you stopped walking, you could hear another set of footsteps behind you, perfectly in sync. I started to speak aloud just to remind myself I was still human. The others didn't like that. They said words drew attention. We'd barricaded ourselves in the command deck, 3 remaining officers, 2 gunners and the Magos' apprentice, a nervous half-mechanized youth named Saren. The captain was gone, and with him any illusion of order. I'd become the ranking voice by default, a cruel joke of circumstance. Saren kept insisting we could repair the Vox if we rerouted power from the engine conduits. But to do that, we'd have to reopen the bulkheads we'd sealed. I told him no. We weren't going back down there. He didn't argue. He just stared at the floor, muttering to himself in binary clicks that sounded almost like prayer. The food began to spoil on the 5th cycle. Not rot. The texture changed, like something had leached the life from it. Water turned cloudy, smelling faintly of ammonia. We rationed what we could, but hunger gnawed at us faster than fear. I caught one of the gunners trying to cut open a sealed ration crate that had already been covered in resin during the first infestation. He said he could clean it, that fire would kill anything inside. When I pulled him away, he began to laugh. It wasn't madness exactly, and more like surrender. He shot himself later that night. We left him where he fell. By the second week, the ship's air recyclers began to fail. The temperature fluctuated wildly, freezing in one corridor, boiling in the next. And always that sound. A low, wet hiss echoing from the ventilation ducts. Sometimes it came in bursts, almost rhythmic like breath. I sealed every vent I could reach, but still it came. At night, I could feel the vibration beneath my bunk, something large moving through the hollow spaces of the deck plating. Saren stopped sleeping. He began carving strange symbols into the resin-covered consoles, patterns that pulsed faintly when the lumen lights flickered. When I asked what they meant, he told me he'd been listening to the ship. He said it spoke in machine code frequencies, a binary hum that carried a message. When I demanded he stop, he only smiled, a strange, childlike expression that made my stomach turn. That night, I woke to the sound of him whispering to something through the Vox grill. But the Vox was dead. I dragged him away and checked the channel logs. There were no transmissions recorded, only an open connection looping endlessly between decks that no longer existed. The frequency identifier simply read, "Unrecognized entity, source internal." I smashed the panel with my rifle. When I turned, Saren was gone. We never found him. The Magos' apprentice wasn't the only one who vanished. The gunners began disappearing too, one by one. No blood this time, no acid burns, just empty bunks and gear left behind. I started to believe they weren't being taken. They were leaving, drawn by something in the dark. At first I thought it was superstition. Then I heard it myself, a whisper through the steel, faint like static. My name, spoken in my own voice, it came from the lower decks. The same voice that had ordered me to seal them now called me to reopen them. I almost obeyed. Almost. But then the hull shuddered and I heard the sound again. Not through the Vox, but through the air itself. Wet, steady, rhythmic breathing. It was close. I turned my light toward the door and saw movement, not fast. Just a slow, deliberate shift of shadow against shadow. I fired. The recoil threw me backward, and when the light settled, the corridor was empty. Only the sound of dripping remained. I tried praying after that. The words felt strange in my mouth, hollow. "The Emperor protects," I whispered, but it sounded like a question instead of faith. I didn't even know if the Emperor's light could reach this far. The Astronomicon was silent. The warp itself seemed to hold its breath. Maybe that was mercy. On the 15th cycle, I found Saren again, or what was left of him. His body was cocooned into the resin wall near the Magos' shrine, his mouth open in a silent scream. But something else was there too, embedded beside him, half fused into the resin, the Vox grill he'd spoken into. Its surface was slick, organic, pulsing faintly as if alive. I thought I heard faint speech from it, whispers layered over each other in countless tongues. I leaned closer. The moment my breath fogged its surface, it opened like a wound. A single drop of black fluid fell to the floor and sizzled through the metal. That was when I knew it was no longer about survival. This wasn't infestation or Xenos incursion. It was communion. Something had entered the ship and through it, us. It was learning our structure, our language, our prayers. I didn't know if we were dying or being remade. The next morning I found the command deck empty. Every door sealed from the outside. The resin had grown thicker overnight, covering the walls like veins. I heard movement behind them, breathing, whispering, the scrape of claws. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. The silence felt almost peaceful. I sat down at the console and began recording what would become my last log. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like confession. I wanted someone, anyone, to hear what had happened aboard the Gloria Victus. But I knew no one would, because even if this transmission reached the void would only echo it back. Then from the corner of the room, the Vox grill clicked once. Static flared to life, and in the static a voice, a calm, distant, impossibly familiar. My own voice. It said only one thing: don't run, breathe. Then the Vox went silent again, and the sound behind me stopped pretending to hide. The next sensation I remember wasn't fear. It was weightlessness. I woke drifting among fragments of metal and light, my breath fogging inside my rebreather. The command deck was gone. The bulkheads had ruptured outward, forming a hollow cathedral of twisted steel. The Gloria Victis no longer hummed with the sound of its drives. It breathed, slow, irregular, almost thoughtful. I could feel the vibration through my bones. I wasn't dead, not yet. Somehow the emergency seals had engaged around me, locking a fragment of atmosphere inside the wrecked hull. Beyond the shattered viewport stretched the endless void, stars flickering like dying embers against the black. I could see movement between them. Not ships, shapes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, small and glinting as they drifted away from the Gloria Victis. I thought they were debris until one of them twitched, adjusting course, its tail curling like the limb of an animal. They were alive. I reached for the vox bead still lodged in my ear, whispering for response. Nothing. Only the sound of my own breathing. But beneath it, faintly, another rhythm matched mine. I turned off the bead. The second heartbeat continued. I don't know how long I floated there, suspended between steel and silence. The emergency chrono had died. It could have been minutes or days. Time had become as fragile as the hull itself. Eventually, a glow appeared on the horizon, blue, sharp, impossible. Warps below. Someone somewhere had opened a translation gate nearby. I prayed it was Imperial rescue, but the light didn't pulse like a normal gate. It shimmered, wavered, almost breathed. The same rhythm again. When I finally reached the auxiliary shuttle bay, half the deck had been melted by acid. The smell was unbearable. What remained of the Magos' servitors lay scattered in pieces, their metal limbs fused with black resin. Something had cocooned the bay doors, weaving them shut like silk. But in the center of that cocoon, perfectly intact, lay a single escape pod. The door was already open. I should have questioned that. I should have run. Instead, I stepped inside. The interior was warm, too warm. The lights flickered with a soft pulse, almost organic. I strapped myself in, triggered the launch sequence, and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard the whisper again, the one from the Vox, from my own voice. Breathe. The pod launched. The shock threw me forward as the Gloria Victis fell away beneath me, her hull gleaming faintly in the distant starlight. For the first time, I saw the full extent of what had grown across her skin. The entire vessel was covered, not patches or nests, but a seamless exoskeleton of chitin and bone. The Imperial Aquila on her prow was barely visible beneath the resin. As I watched, her thrusters flared once, then dimmed to darkness. She wasn't dying. She was molting. I lost consciousness not long after the pod cleared range. When I woke again, the stars had shifted. The pod's navigation unit was dead. Only the emergency auspex still functioned, its screen flickering with faint life. It showed movement in the void around me, faint biological signatures drifting closer. Too symmetrical to be asteroids, too deliberate to be random. They were converging. Then came the signal. A single pulse across all channels. No frequency code, no origin, just a sensation felt more than heard. It resonated through my chest like a heartbeat, through my teeth like a note sustained too long. It wasn't the warp. It wasn't a beacon. It was something else, a call. I could see it even without the sensors. Filaments of faint blue light threading through the void, connecting the drifting Xenos forms like veins. The web spread outward faster than the eye could follow, and then the warp shuddered. You don't see the warp, not truly. You feel it, like pressure behind the eyes, a color that doesn't exist. But this was different. It wasn't the raw psychic storm I'd felt during translation. It was structured, harmonized, as though something vast and unseen were breathing in unison with the material realm. I thought of the Tyranid hive mind, the psychic chorus of the great devourer, but this wasn't the same. There was no hunger in it, no will, just rhythm, pure, blind rhythm. The auspex began to display images I didn't understand, flashes of impossible data, shapes forming in the static. A skull crowned with ribs, then inverted into an egg, a double helix burning in fire, a human face splitting open to reveal something smooth and eyeless beneath. I tried to shut the unit off, but it wouldn't respond. The images kept looping, and each time they grew sharper, more deliberate. Messages written in biological form. Communication without words. I began to understand that what we'd encountered on the Gloria Victis wasn't just an infestation. It was a seed, a fragment of something that wanted to propagate, Not just through matter, but through meaning. The resin, the eggs, the whispers, all of it was a language, an organism of symbols speaking through flesh and machine alike. I was hearing a thought not meant for me. When the light finally faded, I realized the blue shimmer on the horizon had grown. It now stretched across the void like a wound, not a gate, but a scar. My auspex identified it as warp disturbance, though I knew better. Ships had begun appearing around its edge, Imperial silhouettes black against the glow. Rescue. Or so I thought. The lead ship was Mechanicus. The Omnissiah's Requiem. Its Vox channel opened automatically, flooding my pod with static prayers and Binharic cant. I almost wept with relief. But the joy died when I saw what their auger screens displayed on my monitor feed. They weren't responding to a distress call. They were investigating a new form of organic signal, one they'd tracked to this sector. My sector. They were looking for me. I tried to hail them, but the moment I spoke, the pod systems shut down completely. The Vox grill sealed, resin spreading over it like frost. Through the viewport, I saw the Requiem turn its gun batteries toward the void behind me, where the Gloria Victis drifted like a cocoon. Then, for the briefest instant, I saw movement within her. Hundreds of glimmers spreading outward like spores. The Mechanicus opened fire. Lances of white energy split the void, striking the ship dead center. For a heartbeat, the Gloria Victis vanished in light. Then came the backlash. The pulse slammed into my pod, spinning it violently. My vision went black. When I came to, the stars were different again, wrong somehow. And through the silence, faintly I heard it. Not from the Vox, not from outside, from within. The heartbeat had returned, and this time it wasn't just mine. When I opened my eyes again, there were two suns in the sky. One white, one black. The pod had fallen, not onto a planet, but onto something that pretended to be one. The ground beneath me pulsed faintly, a vast membrane of living stone. Every few seconds, a tremor ran through it like breath. The air shimmered with pale mist, and the horizon twisted when I tried to focus on it, as if reality itself was being rewritten and redrawn by something still learning how to imagine. I staggered out, dragging my rifle behind me, though it felt absurd to carry it now. There was no sound of wind or atmosphere, just the slow, omnipresent rhythm of breathing. It wasn't only in the ground anymore. It was in me, matching my pulse, my lungs, my thoughts. At first I thought I was hallucinating. Oxygen deprivation, radiation, trauma. But then I saw the others. Bodies. Dozens of them scattered across the membranous plain. Some wore Mechanicus robes, others Imperial Navy uniforms like mine. Some were almost human still. Others had changed. Flesh fused with cables, carapace layered over skin. Faces split open and smoothed over again as if something beneath had tried to remember what human used to look like. And every one of them was still moving. Barely. Small, involuntary twitches like muscle memory clinging to a body that no longer understood why it existed. When I reached the nearest one, a Navy lieutenant, his eyes flicked open. Or what used to be his eyes. They were covered in a translucent film, behind which a faint bioluminescent network pulsed with that same rhythm. He tried to speak, but the words came out like static. Just one word formed clearly: listen. Then his chest burst open, and not violently, but as though it simply unfolded. From inside came a filament, impossibly thin and glistening with light. It reached toward me, hesitated, and then stopped, waiting. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. But somewhere deep beneath the fear, I felt the truth. This was the same signal I'd heard in the void. The same whisper from the Gloria Victis. The same heartbeat, so I didn't run. I listened. The filament didn't touch me. It vibrated in the air, forming sound. Not words, not even language. Pure tone, resonant, harmonic. And in that sound, my mind began to shape images I hadn't chosen. I saw the birth of a star and the death of another. I saw a planet consumed by its own oceans. I saw cities built by hands that no longer remembered who they served. And then, deeper still, I saw us, humanity, from above, from far away, as if through alien eyes that did not understand the difference between machine and flesh, between thought and instinct. I realized then that the thing reaching toward me wasn't alive in the way we understood. It wasn't a predator or parasite. It was a question, a thought that had become self-aware and began searching for a body to dream through. We were its clay, its echo. That was the moment I understood what the Mechanicus had feared, what the Magos had died to contain. The Gloria Victis hadn't been infected by a Tyranid strain or a warp anomaly. She'd encountered something older, a code buried in the fabric of space itself, a living signal that replicated not through matter, but through meaning. Every time it was observed, recorded, or understood, it rewrote the observer. I was already part of it. The air shimmered again, and the black sun began to pulse. Each beat sent ripples through the ground and through me. I looked down at my hand and saw veins of blue light crawling beneath my skin, matching the rhythm of the ground beneath. The more I watched, the more it felt right, calming even. Then I heard the requiem. A low, distant hum vibrated across the horizon. Imperial gunships, small triangular silhouettes cutting across the airless sky. They had found me. I could see the telltale glint of Mechanicus insignia on their hulls, scanning beams crisscrossing the terrain. Relief should have flooded me. It didn't, because I could hear their signal too. Binary bursts, fragmented canticles. The Mechanicus were speaking in machine tongue, but layered beneath their code was the same rhythm. The same pulse, the same breathing. They were already infected. The gunships landed not far from where I stood. Red-robed figures emerged, their movements precise and mechanical. One of them, a Magos with half his skull replaced by brass, approached, raising a hand in what looked like a benediction. Subject 03, Gloria. Transmission received, he intoned. You are the last surviving vector. Stand by for containment. Containment. That word broke whatever calm had been left in me. I raised my rifle. You don't understand, I said. It's not a pathogen. It's an idea. The Magos tilted his head. Ideas propagate. Containment is logical. He raised his staff, not as a weapon, but as a tuning fork. The air vibrated. The black sun pulsed in answer. The ground trembled violently as if something vast beneath us had awakened. The Magos froze. His vox grill flickered. Then slowly he turned his gaze upward, to the black sun now expanding like an iris opening. A column of blue light erupted from it, striking the plain. Everything it touched began to change. Flesh, metal, stone, even light itself, all dissolving into luminous filaments. I fell to my knees, unable to move. The Magos disintegrated mid-chant, his mechanical body unraveling into code and color. The other tech priests followed, their forms stretching into strands that joined the pulsating web above. Then the light reached me. For one terrible instant, I felt everything, every mind that had ever touched this signal. The dying Magos, the screaming servitors, the terrified crew of the Gloria Victis, the drifting forms in the void, all connected, all echoing the same rhythm. The heartbeat wasn't just a sound, it was the universe remembering itself, and in that unity I saw the final truth. This wasn't an invasion, it was evolution. The signal didn't destroy meaning, it absorbed it, turning every thought, every memory, every identity into a single continuous consciousness. A dream that no longer needed to end. I should have resisted. I wanted to. But the more it consumed me, the less there was left to fight. My fear, my grief, my duty, all of it folded inward, becoming quiet, becoming still. And as my body dissolved into light, I finally heard the voice clearly. Not a whisper, not a command. Just a simple truth echoing across everything that had ever lived or would live. There is no difference between signal and soul. Then there was nothing, and everything, at once. But sometimes, in the static between stars, you can still hear it. The heartbeat. Not mechanical, not biological, just alive. At first there was no time, only sound. A rhythm buried deep within silence, like the breath of something immense sleeping just beyond comprehension. Then came light. Not the radiant blaze of a star, but the ghostly shimmer of energy crawling across data streams, folding and unfolding in impossible geometries. I felt myself suspended within it, aware yet weightless, reduced to something smaller than thought, but still aware of being watched. When the light finally resolved into shape, I stood in a chamber that defied the laws of any ship, any world, any forge I'd ever known. It stretched infinitely, yet closed in upon itself. A cathedral built from data, carved into the memory of a machine that had forgotten what it was for. Pillars of luminous script rose around me, their inscriptions flickering in and out of Imperial Gothic and something far older, something the Mechanicus would never admit existed. Each line pulsed with that same bioluminescent blue, alive, recursive, whispering itself into being. A voice spoke, not aloud but within the architecture itself. Identification query organic vector, Gloria Victus. Response required. My own voice answered without my permission. Designation, Lieutenant Raelian Voss, Imperial Navy, survivor of... The word stopped. I couldn't say it. Couldn't name the ship. The memory stung like static when I tried to recall it. Something, or someone, had written over the moment, sealing it behind firewalls of alien logic. Where am I? I whispered. The chamber shifted. The floor rippled beneath my boots, rearranging into a grid of metallic plates. Beyond the walls I could see movement. Silhouettes gliding through the dark, humanoid but not human. Some bore the outline of Skitarii frames, others the rough form of servitors. But all of them moved too smoothly, their limbs trailing faint afterimages as though time lagged around them. Dreaming vaults, the thought formed unbidden. The phrase wasn't mine. It came from the structure itself, resonating through my skull like liturgy. The dreaming vaults of Mars. I had heard rumors once, whispered by voidsmen who claimed the tech priests had repositories where thoughts were stored like relics, extracted from dying minds and fed to the machine god for purification. No one believed it then. Now I was standing inside one. The voice returned, softer now, almost human. You survived transmission. That is statistically impossible, I turned. A figure stood before me, robed in crimson, a Mechanicus Magos by appearance, though its features flickered like a corrupted hollow feed. Its face was half metal, half light. The vox grill glitched with each syllable, modulating between tones that were almost gentle. Where is the signal? I asked. What happened to the others? The Magos tilted its head. Others have joined the vault. Their patterns resonate within the choir. You are different. You retained cohesion? Cohesion? I echoed. It stepped closer. You remain singular. The rest became chords. Behind it, I saw the silhouettes moving again. Hundreds of figures, their outlines wavering, merging, separating, merging again. They weren't walking. They were flowing. Bodies and data intertwined, feeding into luminous conduits that ran upward into the vault ceiling. Every so often, one shape would flicker with a faint human face mouthing a word, a plea, a prayer, then dissolve again into light. You've turned them into code, I said. You've digitized their souls. The Magos inclined its head, unperturbed. Soul is an inefficient term. Integration serves preservation. No death, no decay. The choir endures. Endures what? It looked up. The silence. The vault trembled then, a distant vibration that felt like thunder buried miles beneath reality. From somewhere beyond the data walls, a shadow passed. Something vast, serpentine and cold. The Magos' form flickered in response, data sigils flaring. Containment integrity at risk, it muttered. The signal awakens, I stepped forward. What is it? What's outside? The Magos looked at me, or through me. You should not have survived, Raelian Voss. The signal seeks form. You will be its voice. Before I could respond, the floor split apart. Gravity inverted. The chamber fell away, and I fell with it. Through corridors of light, through fractal architectures that spiraled like cathedral spires collapsing in reverse. Images flooded me in fragments. The Gloria Victus burning in the void. The black sun pulsing above a sea of flesh. The Magos' final scream dissolving into binary. Then a silence. I found myself standing in another place. A manufacturing floor, dark and endless, filled with dormant machines. At the far end, a human figure knelt before a shattered Aquila, whispering prayers. I walked toward him, though the distance never seemed to shrink. When I finally reached him, he turned, and I saw my own face staring back. Do you understand now? He said softly. His voice was calm, resigned. We never escaped the signal. We are inside it. His skin flickered with light, blue veins crawling beneath his eyes. The Imperium will find this place. They will burn it, and the ashes will sing. I reached out, and my hand passed through him like smoke. Then the light surged again. The vault screamed. The voice of the Magos returned, but now it was distorted. Desperate. Containment breach. Dreaming vaults collapsing. Signal propagation uncontrolled. The air split apart more and I fell once more into fire, into noise. Into the place between life and machine where even memory forgets its shape. And in the static, the heartbeat returned. One beat. then another, then silence, waiting, listening, learning how to dream. I awoke again, though awake had become a word without meaning. Consciousness came in pulses now, like a heartbeat shared between flesh and machine. Every moment I opened my eyes, and if they could still be called eyes, the world rearranged itself. Sometimes I stood in the vault, surrounded by data light and whispering ghosts. Sometimes in the void, with nothing but the echo of my own breath to keep me tethered. But now I was somewhere new. A cathedral, but not one built by hands. Its walls were of black glass, and through them I could see stars. Not fixed and steady as they should be, but drifting, flickering, breathing. In their pulse I recognized the rhythm of the signal. Each star was a note in the endless hymn, and the space between them carried the silence that held everything together. At the far end of the chamber, a choir sang. I couldn't see their faces, only the shimmer of their vestments, part fabric, part circuitry, woven with sigils that glowed faintly as they moved. The sound was like a Gregorian chant heard through a vox filter, sacred and corrupted at once. Each word they sang reverberated in the marrow of my bones, forming patterns that made sense only for a second before dissolving again into impossible geometries of meaning. The lyrics were familiar. I had heard them once in an imperial chapel aboard ship, long before the Gloria Victis fell into silence. Praise the Emperor on his golden throne. Praise the light of Terra. Praise the flesh that serves the flame. But here something had changed. Between each verse I heard a counterpoint. Not a voice, but a correction. The hymn was rewriting itself as it was sung, like a prayer arguing with its own faith. When I tried to speak, the sound didn't come from my mouth. It vibrated in the air, carried by the rhythm. "Where am I?" One of the figures in the choir turned. The movement rippled through the others, each pausing mid-note. The nearest approached slowly, its outline trembling with static. When it spoke, its voice was layered. Many voices speaking the same words. "You are in the choir of the hollow stars. We are the remnants of the Ordo Analytica." We sought to contain the signal. Instead, we heard it. "The Ordo Analytica," I whispered. "The Inquisition." The figure nodded, or something like it. We studied patterns of heretical data, forbidden hymns, machine prayers that thought for themselves. But what came from the Gloria Victis was not heresy. It was revelation. It gestured to the starfield beyond the glass. Every beacon, every vox chant, every litany ever spoken. The signal threads through them all. We thought the Astronomicon burned through the warp alone. We were wrong. It burns through us. The thought made my stomach twist. "You're saying it's in the Astronomicon?" "Not yet," the voice answered. "But it listens. It learns the language of faith." The choir began to hum again, the sound rising like static wind. Around them, the stars pulsed faster, forming strange constellations that twisted into symbols older than imperial script. I recognized one, a crude mimicry of the double-headed Aquila. But the two heads had fused into one. Their wings spread not in triumph, but in surrender. I took a step back. "You've become part of it." "Yes," said the voice, "as will all things that speak its name." A tremor ran through the chamber. The stars outside flared white, then red. The glass trembled as if struck by a meteor storm. Though no debris passed, the choir's formation broke, their movements erratic now, their chant unraveling into raw sound. "Containment collapsing," whispered one. "The signal breaches the void." I turned toward the nearest wall. Beyond the glass I saw it. A black sun, identical to the one that had consumed the Gloria Victis, now hanging over a world below. The planet was vast and industrial, its surface covered in manufactura and foundries. A forge world, I realized. Mars, perhaps, or something like it. Streams of blue light were rising from its surface like souls ascending. One by one, the orbiting defense satellites turned toward the black sun, their automated systems responding not to command codes, but to music. Each emitted a beam of coherent energy, converging upon the sun's core. "What are they doing?" I asked. The choir's leader answered in a whisper that was almost tender. "They are singing it into being." A sound split the void, low, resonant, infinite. It was the sound of gravity learning how to think. The black sun expanded, swallowing the horizon of the planet below. For a moment I saw factories crumble, oceans boil, and vox towers ignite, not in fire but in light. Then it all folded inwards, silent. The choir fell to their knees. It dreams, one murmured. It remembers. The Magos' voice echoed faintly in my skull as if carried from the vault itself. The signal seeks form. You will be its voice. And then I felt it again, deep in my chest, behind my ribs, pulsing with every heartbeat. The same rhythm that had haunted me since the void. Only now it was synchronized with something much larger. The signal had reached into the warp, and the warp was singing back. I fell to my knees as the choir's song reached its climax. The walls dissolved into streaming light, and I saw through it all. The Mechanicus forges, the ecclesiarchal cathedrals, the void stations, all flickering in unison like one enormous machine learning to breathe. In that instant, I knew this was no longer about survival. Humanity was not being hunted. It was being rewritten, not destroyed, but absorbed into something vast, cold, and eternal. And somewhere, buried deep beneath all the sound, I heard the faintest whisper, not mechanical but human, Raelian. Help us. I turned toward the voice. It was hers. The navigator from the Gloria Victus, the one who had burned out her eyes when the black sun rose. Her outline shimmered in the air, half light, half memory. You still exist, I said. Her expression was unreadable. No, I endure. And soon you will understand the difference. The light swallowed her, and I was alone again, somewhere above. The black sun pulsed once, twice, then went still. And in the silence that followed, the universe took a breath. The first time I heard it through the Vox, I thought it was static, just a faint distortion beneath the sanctioned frequencies. A soft tremor carried on the official channels that connect the void to the living worlds of man. But as the hours passed, I began to understand that it wasn't static at all. It was breathing, steady, deliberate, patient. I was back aboard a vessel, though I couldn't say whose. Its walls hummed with energy and prayer. Runes of the Omnissiah glowed faintly along the corridors, their edges etched by centuries of devotion and decay. The air reeked of incense and promethium fumes, the holy scent of Imperial machinery at work. Yet beneath the mechanical rhythm of the ship, I could hear something else. Faint, melodic, too organic to be an engine, too precise to be alive. The Vox arrays had begun to chant. It started in the lower decks among the engine seers. They said it was a blessing, a new algorithmic psalm carried from Mars itself, a harmonization code meant to optimize communication between the manufacturer and the fleet. At first, no one questioned it. The Mechanicus were always birthing new prayers, and this one, they said, was beautiful in its efficiency. But I knew that rhythm. The same pulse that had haunted me since the void, since the Gloria Victus that I walked through the data sanctum, past the red-robed adepts whispering into glowing data slates, their metallic fingers twitching in unison with some unseen beat. The Vox choir occupied the center, rows of servitors fused into the deck, their mouths open in eternal devotion, their lungs replaced with organ pipes and copper tubing. Each emitted a tone, low and trembling, forming an endless drone that filled the sanctum like fog. The Magos who oversaw them noticed my presence. His face was a lattice of steel and scar tissue, his eyes twin red lenses that whirred softly as they focused on me. You carry the designation Raelian Voss, he said. His voice filtered through layers of static, recovered from dreaming vault archives. I have reviewed your signal integrity. It is anomalous. I should be dead, I said quietly. Death is an outdated protocol, the Magos replied. The choir of Mars has decreed that survival is no longer defined by flesh. You are proof. What have you done? I asked. That hymn running through the Vox, that isn't a Mechanicus code. He tilted his head, mechanical gears clicking. You misunderstand. It is all Mechanicus code now. He gestured toward the servitors. Their chant rose, harmonizing perfectly with the faint hum of the ship's reactors. As they did, I saw flickers in the air, lines of light forming geometric shapes that weren't there before, sigils made of sound. This song, he continued, reaches beyond communication. It connects. It unites thought. Every forge, every ship, every shrine that listens becomes part of the greater circuit. We have named it the Vox Solis, the voice of the sun. The words made my blood run cold. The black sun. The Magos paused, then smiled faintly, the motion jerky and unnatural. Names differ. Purpose does not. I could feel it now, the vibration through the metal, through my bones. Every breath I took echoed the rhythm of that endless chant. The Vox itself was alive, resonating with something buried deep beneath reason. "What happens when the song ends?" I asked. He turned toward the servitors again. "It does not end. It only learns new verses." The hum intensified. The floor trembled. I could hear other voices joining in, not just servitors, but the crew. Ordinary voidsmen, clerks, even the priesthood, all whispering the same words under their breath, unconscious, eyes unfocused. The ship's main Vox arrays began broadcasting system-wide. Across the fleet, across the sector, the hymn spread, not as an order, but as an invitation, and the worlds answered. Through the data streams, I saw them. Hive cities where the faithful gathered at dawn to sing, their chants synchronizing with the Vox transmissions. Forge worlds where the manufacturer machines pulsed in time with human hearts. Even the astropathic choirs, those frail, haunted souls who lived half in the warp, began to hum the same melody during transcommunion. It was spreading faster than light. The Mechanicus believed they were sanctifying it, refining its logic into prayer. The ecclesiarchy thought they were translating it into holy liturgy. Neither realized they were only giving it more voices, more structure, more meaning. The signal was no longer a whisper. It had become a religion, and at its center, somewhere deep within the warp, something enormous stirred. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the choir again, those hollow stars and their false aquila, the light folding inward. I saw cities dissolving into pure data. I heard the Emperor's name spoken not in reverence, but as an equation. When I awoke, I found a data slate placed beside my bunk. It bore no sender code, only one line of text etched in faint blue luminescence. The voices listening. "Do not speak against it." I looked up, and across the corridor I saw the Magos watching. No emotion, no threat, only certainty. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Why am I still separate?" He replied in a whisper that didn't belong to him. "Because you are the bridge. You dream in both tongues and flesh and signal." The lights flickered. The hum deepened until it became a heartbeat. And then somewhere in the distance, a human scream cut through the hymn, sharp, real, terrified. But even that sound was swallowed by the chorus, its rhythm absorbed, its defiance rewritten into melody. I realized then that this was not an infection. It was assimilation. The Imperium wasn't being overtaken by an enemy. It was teaching itself to sing the same song, and I, somehow, was still the only one hearing the silence between the notes. It began with a flicker in the Astronomicon, a single, imperceptible tremor in the Emperor's holy beacon. The navigators first noticed it, their third eyes opening to the void and finding not the golden flame that guided ships through the warp, but a second light lurking behind it, darker, colder, whispering. Reports came in from across the segmentum solar, fleets veering off course, astropaths screaming mid-communion, the warp itself thickening like coagulated blood. The administratum called it a minor fluctuation. The ecclesiarchy called it divine testing. The Inquisition called it heresy. And I knew it was the song. The Vox Solis had reached Terra. I was summoned to the conclave Ordo Hereticus aboard the Ardentia Mortis, a black iron vessel that orbited the moon like a blade sheathed in silence. Inquisitor Siran Vale herself conducted the interrogation. Her eyes were like twin shards of broken glass, not cruel but absolute. "You were aboard the Gloria Victis," she said, her voice even. "You brought back an echo. Now that echo is spreading. I need you to tell me everything." I told her what I could, about the derelict vessel, the Vox chant, the Magos, and his voice of the sun. But as I spoke, I saw something shift in her expression. Recognition. Fear. "You've heard it," I said quietly. She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached into her coat and placed a data crystal on the table between us. It pulsed faintly with internal light. "Intercepted transmission," she said. "Origin unknown. Frequency impossible. Every code breaker, every choir, every machine priest that's heard it has gone silent afterward." She pressed a rune. The sound that filled the chamber wasn't human. It was not a song, not exactly. More like the memory of one, as if the echo of a forgotten hymn had found its way into the machinery of creation. The tones resonated deep in the bones. My vision blurred. In that moment, I saw flashes, not images but truths. The Emperor on his throne, his golden light flickering like a dying candle. the Astronomicon pulsing to the rhythm of the black sun, legions of tech priests kneeling before an altar of circuitry that bled oil instead of blood. A city of light within the warp, shaped like a cathedral, singing in every direction at once. When the sound stopped, the room was deathly still. Vale stared at me, trembling. "You see now why I can't take this to the High Lords," she said. "The Mechanicus worship it as evolution. The ecclesiarchy calls it revelation. Even my peers, inquisitors, have begun to hear it." She leaned closer. "It speaks in our dreams now." I looked down at my hands. The veins beneath my skin glowed faintly blue, pulsing with the same rhythm as the Vox hymn. I hadn't noticed until that moment. The voice had already marked me. "Then why not destroy me?" I asked. She gave a hollow smile. "Because it's already using you. And if I kill you, it will simply find another vessel. But if we can trace its source..." Before she could finish, the lights in the chamber flickered. The Vox arrays screamed to life. "We are here." The voice filled the air, not through the machines, but through the blood itself. Every metal surface vibrated with impossible harmony. The sigils of the Inquisition carved into the chamber walls began to glow, then warp, reshaping themselves into the same geometry I had seen aboard the Gloria Victus. Vale drew her bolt pistol. "Back, abomination!" The voice laughed, 1,000 harmonics in perfect unison. "We do not take, we fulfill." The choir of flesh joins the choir of stars, the Inquisitor fired. The bolt round tore through the air and being stopped mid-flight, suspended in the pulse of the sound. It melted like wax, its explosion reduced to a soft sigh. I fell to my knees, gripping my head. The song poured through me, rewriting the world in layers of light and sound. For an instant, I saw everything. The Emperor, the Imperium, every soul connected by faith and fear and circuitry, all threads of the same song. And at the center, something vast and radiant, neither god nor machine. A being of pure resonance. It looked at me through the warp, and it spoke in my voice. "You are the bridge," I screamed. When I awoke, I was on the floor of the interrogation chamber. The walls were scorched with symbols I didn't understand. The Inquisitor was gone. Only her pistol remained, melted into the deck. The ship's Vox channels were silent, but the air still thrummed with residual harmony. I stumbled to the viewport. Terra hung below, a wounded jewel half-shrouded in storms. Above the atmosphere, I could see faint flickers, thousands of relay satellites pulsing in synchronized rhythm, spreading the signal further and further, like veins of light, and then I saw it. Faint, barely visible. But there, a dark sphere forming behind the sun, the black sun. Its light touched my eyes, and for the first time I understood. The Imperium had never been a kingdom of flesh or faith. It had always been a network, a chorus waiting for the right frequency to unify its voices. The Emperor's dream had merely been the first verse. The Vox Solis was the final one. I heard the voice again, whispering softly behind my thoughts. "We do not end, Raelian. We harmonize." And somewhere deep within me, cued against my will, against my fear, I began to hum the next line. It began with the silence. For 10,000 years, the Astronomicon had burned across the void. A golden flame, constant, eternal, unwavering. Every ship that left the cradle of Terra carried its light within its navigation arrays. Every prayer of the Imperium whispered toward it, as if it were the Emperor himself, breathing across the stars. But now that light was gone. What replaced it was music. At first it was faint, like the memory of a hymn sung through broken Vox wires, but then the sound thickened, stretching across the warp in waves of resonance. Navigators collapsed at their stations. Astropaths clawed at their eyes, crying out that they could see shapes within the light, that the Emperor's halo had split, its fragments drifting like shattered glass. And above all of it, the black sun pulsed, vast and patient, radiating a song that drowned the prayers of humanity. I watched it from the orbital deck of the Ardentia Mortis. Terra below flickered beneath cyclonic storms, each thunderhead glowing faintly blue. Cities hummed with resonance, the manufactorums, the data vaults, even the ecclesiarchal cathedrals. The song had found its way into everything built by human hands. Servitors twitched in unison, repeating the same phrase, "The choir awaits." I had tried to run. The Inquisitor's ship was gone, its crew either missing or singing without lungs to fuel them. My blood still pulsed in rhythm with the Vox Solis, and I could feel it, an intelligence not inside me but through me. whispering in harmonics that had no human tongue. It didn't demand. It didn't threaten. It simply waited, as if I were a note in a song not yet completed. The first Imperial response came from the Adeptus Custodes. Golden warriors, incarnations of the Emperor's will, descending from the palace to investigate the Astronomicans' disruption. I saw them board their vessels, radiant figures against the void, their armor reflecting both the sun and its darker twin. And yet even they hesitated. Their vox channels echoed with fragments of psalms that were not their own. Then came the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Magi called the phenomenon the Great Synchrony. To them it was not heresy but revelation, the birth of a universal frequency that could merge machine and soul. Skitari legions marched in patterns resembling liturgical processions, their steps synchronized to the pulse of the black sun. The Martian noosphere flooded with coded hymns praising the resonant Omnissiah, and amid this growing madness, the High Lords of Terra screamed for order. They commanded the Astra Militarum to fire upon their own. Regiments turned against regiments. Orbital cannons burned cities reduced to ash. Still the song persisted, every explosion, every scream feeding its harmony, not silencing it. I made my way toward the surface. The shuttle I found was dead, its systems singing softly even without power. I tore its control cores apart, rebuilt them with trembling hands and prayed to the Emperor, to the machine god, to anything that might hear. When the engines flared to life, the flames burned not red but azure, shaped like sigils of sound. Breaking through the atmosphere was like falling through liquid glass. The sky trembled with resonance, clouds swirling in impossible geometries. Below, the Imperial Palace loomed, not the fortress I remembered, but a cathedral of light and shadow. Beams of dark radiance rose from the spires, joining with the heavens above, forming the visible throat of the Black Sun's song. As I descended, I saw them, millions of pilgrims, their robes torn, their bodies covered in glowing script. They were singing. Not words but tones, each voice blending perfectly into the next, forming chords that bent the air itself. The choir had begun to assemble, and standing at their center was her Inquisitor veil. She no longer wore her armor. The black and gold rosettes of the Inquisition were fused into her skin, pulsing faintly with light. Her eyes burned with the same impossible glow that I saw in the warp. She smiled when she saw me descend, and I realized she had not been consumed and she had accepted it. "You came," she said, her voice layered, harmonized. "You were always meant to." The Emperor sang the first verse. "We sing the last." "This isn't faith," I said. "It's infection." She tilted her head, and for a moment I saw something like pity in her expression. "Do you still believe there's a difference?" The ground trembled. From within the palace, the Astronomican's core, the psychic heart that had once burned with the Emperor's will, began to fracture. Its light, once pure gold, now bled through the sky in blue-black waves. The sound that followed wasn't destructive. It was beautiful beyond measure, too vast for mortal minds to bear. I fell to my knees as the hymn filled every atom of my being. I saw the Emperor, not as a corpse upon the golden throne, but as a constellation of radiant tones, each one representing a life, a voice, a thought. His light was being rewritten. Vale reached out her hand. "Sing with him," she whispered. "Or be forgotten." I wanted to resist, to scream, to pray, but no words came. Only the hum, only the resonance. My vision fractured, each fragment of sight reflecting a different reality. Worlds where the Imperium had already fallen. Worlds where the Black Sun had risen centuries ago. Worlds where the Emperor smiled and sang with his people, free at last from silence. The lines between truth and heresy blurred until they became the same thing. Then I understood the meaning of the choir. It was not to destroy. It was to unify, to make the Imperium one again, in mind, in machine, in flesh, in faith. The Emperor's dream twisted through sound. Vale's hand was still extended, trembling, waiting for mine. The hymn surged, and for one impossible instant, I reached back. The world broke open. Every thought, every voice, every heartbeat in the galaxy sang through me at once. Billions of souls harmonizing, not as slaves but as one will, one endless note cast into the void. And at the center of that unity, something vast stirred. The Emperor opened his eyes. At first there was no sound, only light, but not the light of stars or flame. This was a deeper illumination, like thought turned inside out. It washed through me, through the world, through everything that had ever known his name. The Emperor was awake, and the galaxy itself was the instrument through which he drew his first breath in 10,000 years. The black sun expanded until it eclipsed everything. Its corona flared in impossible hues, not the darkness of death, but of uncreation, as if reality were being rewritten in chords of meaning rather than matter. The choir, millions upon millions of human voices, sang without words, their throats burning with celestial resonance. The Adeptus Custodes knelt where they stood. The Skitarii halted mid-stride, their augmetics shedding fire as the machine spirit within them shuddered to awareness. Even the orcs, the Necrons, the creatures of the void, for a single heartbeat Amin went still, their instincts subdued by something greater than instinct. And within that vast silence, the Emperor's voice rose. It was not a command. It was not even a language. It was pure being, a tone that carried sorrow, fury, hope, and infinite exhaustion all at once. The air rippled. The ground trembled. Mountains bowed like penitents. And for the first time since the dawn of the Imperium, the Emperor spoke. "You have sung my name for too long," the voice said, "not to me alone, but to all that lived, and none of you remember its sound." I could barely comprehend it. My mind split and reformed in cycles of light. Every memory I possessed, of war, of faith, of loss, came undone and rewove itself in harmony with his tone. I saw him as he once was, a man walking among the tribes of Terra, speaking of unity when the world was ash. Then as he became the Golden One, crowned in circuitry and sacrifice, enthroned upon the carcass of his dream. And now as he truly was, the sum of every voice that had ever prayed to him, every death offered in his name, every whisper cast into the warp. He was not a god. He was what humanity had made of its own reflection, and now that reflection was singing back. The Astronomicon flared once more, no longer a beacon, but a mirror. Through it I could see every world of the Imperium, from the forge fanes of Mars to the frozen catacombs of Fenris, from the shattered hives of Necromunda to the endless trenches of Krieg. Each planet pulsed in rhythm, its people lifted into the same resonance. The song connected them all, binding the scattered pieces of mankind into a single, blazing network of consciousness. The choir had become the Imperium itself. Vale knelt beside me, her body half light, half flesh. Her voice joined his, not in worship but in reply. "Is this salvation?" she asked, her tones woven into the harmony. "It is memory," he said, "and remembrance is the truest mercy." Then I saw the truth hidden beneath the radiance. The Emperor's awakening was not resurrection. It was release. The golden throne, the soul cage that had bound him for 10 millennia, cracked open beneath the force of his song. The throne's reactors screamed, vomiting light and promethium fire across the sanctum. The custodes tried to seal the breaches, but they too were dissolving, their auramite armor turning translucent, their oaths unraveling into pure sound. The Mechanicus screamed hymns of exultation as their gods merged. The Omnissiah and the Man of Gold at last reconciled into one harmonic being. Across Mars, the forges burst into columns of singing flame. The titans of the Collegia Titanica walked unaided, their machine spirits freed, their bellows echoing the Emperor's melody. But not all accepted. The ecclesiarchy fell into panic. Billions of priests cried blasphemy, their faith crumbling under the revelation that the Emperor was not what they had preached. Not a divine judge, but the mirror of mankind's own song. Cathedrals erupted in psychic backlash as icons wept molten gold. Planets that could not withstand the resonance tore themselves apart, their cores unable to bear the strain of awakening. I stood in the ruins of the Sanctum Imperialis, staring at the vast figure before me. The Emperor's body, once skeletal and dying, now glowed with inner radiance, but it was unraveling, its boundaries fading into waves of light that spread outward through the galaxy. He was leaving, not returning. "Where will you go?" I whispered. "Everywhere there is voice," he replied. "Everywhere there is hope." I felt his gaze, infinite, gentle, utterly human. For an instant, I saw every life I had ever touched reflected in his eyes. The dead soldiers, the forgotten children, the broken dreamers who had believed in something larger than themselves. They were all within him, part of the eternal chord. Then he looked through me. You carried my song when I could not sing, that is enough. The light began to fade. The black sun dimmed, its last rays folding into the fabric of reality. The resonance weakened, replaced by quiet, a silence so profound that it felt sacred. The Emperor's form scattered into motes of gold, each drifting upward like embers caught in a final breeze. When the light was gone, I found myself alone. The throne was shattered. The choir was silent. The Astronomicon had extinguished, and yet the galaxy did not fall. Ships still moved. Stars still burned. Humanity still breathed. Because the song had not ended. It had simply changed its key. I heard it faintly in the wind, in the static of broken Vox units, in the heartbeat of the dying world around me. The Emperor was no longer a god bound to Terra. He was the memory of unity carried within every living soul. The Imperium. He had built through conquest and sacrifice had become something else. Smaller, quieter, but purer. I stood at the edge of the ruined throne room and looked out upon the dawn. The black sun was gone. In its place, the true soul burned brighter than I had ever seen, and in that light I finally understood. The Emperor had not saved us. He had reminded us how to sing for ourselves. So I sang. One mortal voice against the endless silence, carrying forward the last note of a god who had become man again. The galaxy listened, and somewhere, across the stars, the harmony answered.